What's up, everybody? Welcome to a new edition of Touchdown Texas. I'm your host, Shiva Patel, and we are just 24 days away from the season starting, Texas and Ohio State. And thank you so much for joining this episode. We have a very exciting guest coming here today. CJ Vogel from On Texas Football will be joining me in just a few minutes for this episode. We're going to pick his brain about the team and as they're going through the fall camp and how everybody's looking and certain position groups are coming along as we're about a week into fall camp. But before then, I just wanted to say, be sure to follow us on our social media channels at touchshot_Texas, and be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I'm about to bring CJ in. So, CJ, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. We're so close to football. I can't be more excited for what Texas is going to put on the field this year.
For sure. And those of you that are unfamiliar with CJ, so he is a college football insider and recruiting analyst covering the University of Texas for On Texas Football. He's also an alumni, a UT alumni. He's from the Dallas area. So CJ, let's get started with ball. So my first question is just a program question. So the last 2 years in 23 and 24, Texas has been on the doorstep, back-to-back semifinals, losing in heartbreaking fashion, but really, really close. What do you think they need to do to make the next jump to get over the hump?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. You look at 23 and maybe you're hindered by the absence of a Jonathan Brooks. You look a year ago and you probably didn't have the running game that you expected to have going into the season. You're hampered in the red zone, and clearly that's where your season ends. In fact, both seasons, your season ends in that red area. They have to be better there. On top of red zone efficiency, which I think will improve with the legs of Arch Manning in 2025, I think Texas has to be better in third quarters. That was a big reason why Texas wasn't able to pull away from an Arizona State. It was the big reason why Texas A&M was able to stick around in that game as long as they did, despite not scoring a point offensively in that contest. So, two things. Red zone efficiency has to improve significantly, and third quarters have to be an area in which Texas can't have those lulls as we've seen throughout the last 3 or 4 years, especially with a defense as talented as they have now. They can't be put in tough spots in which that confidence wavers.
For sure. And third quarter became a problem. It started at the Arkansas game. It reared its ugly head at Kentucky. Like CJ said, A&M. A little bit during Clemson, but they had a big enough lead where they were able to overcome that. And then Arizona State. I was at that game. We were feeling good at halftime, and it became a lot more closer game than we thought. So good points there, because that's been the biggest question for Longhorns fans this offseason. And they think we have the talent to be able to make a run and win a national championship, but just those important intangibles that this team needs to improve on from year to year in order to take that next step. So my next question is for you. So one of the biggest additions that Texas had in the portal this offseason was 5 defensive tackles. Usually it's hard to even get one defensive tackle in the portal. Those are very premium position. Texas got 5, plus Alex January coming back, plus the 3 talented freshmen. So I wanted to ask you, what is the ceiling of this defensive tackle room, and could they be better than last year's?
Could they be better than that last year? I think that's the hope. Now, is that the expectation? Look, that's a lot, right? Vernon Broughton, Alfred Collins, 2 guys that went very early in the NFL draft a year ago. I think it might be a little too early, right? They've only been in pads for about 48 hours now, in which we've gotten to see them and hear about what's going on behind the scenes. But I do think you're going to see a fresher group of defensive linemen. Last year, yeah, you had a Jermaine Lole, you had a Bill Norton, but you didn't necessarily have a lot more outside of that group, right? Alex January only had about 100 snaps throughout the entire season. So you're going to have a deeper room. Does that mean, and does that equal better? Probably not on the top end, at least not early on. But I do think you're going to be able to rotate a lot more frequently. I think those guys, as a result, are going to have fresher legs for maybe some higher energy and production out of those specific times when they're on the field. So if you're looking for optimism, it's just that: fresher legs, more rotations, and guys able to go 100% more frequently throughout the duration of a game.
No, for sure, a great point. And those of Texas fans that are not familiar with the names: Travis Shaw, Hero Canoe, Brevard, Levon Johnson, and then who's the fifth one? It's
Murad Watson.
Murad Watson. Thank you, the freshman All-American from Stanford, or from sorry, Syracuse.
Yeah.
So the next question is, so another big move from the fall camp was Trey Moore getting moved from edge to linebacker, and Brad Spence, the Arkansas transfer, being moved from linebacker to edge. What is your takeaways from this move, and how do you think it will impact the Texas defense?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? Because you look at the two of them, you look at them physically, and you say, okay, well, Trey Moore has, 10 more pounds on his frame than that of Brad Spence. You'd figure he'd be best suited for that edge spot, right? A beefier guy. But then you watch them play, and I think there's a significant difference between the two. I think Brad Spence packs a little bit more of a heavier punch on contact, meaning playing the edge, being able to hold some of those run lanes. I think he plays a little bit better in that regard. I think Trey Moore plays better in space. Of course, whenever he really turned it on the second half of the season a year ago, a lot of that was those finesse pass rushing moves, spin moves, swim moves, kind of, in and outs, if you will. That's really where he made a lot of his hay, especially in chase down. He had a big sack against Arizona State. The strip sack against Marcel Reed was coming from the back end, in which he was able to utilize his speed at the linebacking spot. You're able to use him just as you would an Anthony Hill. Right? And how do you defend against Anthony Hill? Well, the point is you don't. Now imagine having two of those guys in the middle of your defense. That's really where you're able to move a lot of those chess pieces around if you're Pete Kwiatkowski, Johnny Nance, and dialing up different exotic blitzes using Hill, using Trey Moore, and now having a Colin Simmons and another pass rusher on the edge. I think that's a tall task for a lot of these opposing offenses Texas will face this year. And it's just more weapons that Texas will be able to unleash in the fall.
Definitely. And this defense has preached versatility, getting your best players on the field. And this is going to help Trey Moore's NFL, future, because they want to see him play a little bit more linebacker. And Brad Spence is also going to be really helped by his NFL future with this move as well, to just show their versatility and being moved in all different parts of the field. So my next question is, so Colin Simmons broke through as a true freshman last year. He had 9.5 sacks, and he was a freshman All-American. In this number one recruiting class, 2025, who was a freshman that you could see that could have a Colin Simmons-esque season?
Yeah, I love this question because, look, for that class specifically, I think for the 24 class, we kind of knew Colin Simmons was going to be that guy. Yes, Texas had other 5-stars in the class. Yes, Texas has had already some really impactful pieces from a year ago. But Colin Simmons was on a different level. I think when you look at this 2025 class and the way that they've progressed since arriving in Austin, there's a number of guys. And I would say, look, we've not yet really heard a whole lot about a Cade Phillips and a Jonah Williams, 2 5-star guys with a lot of expectations. Instead, in that secondary, it's been Grayson Littleton, who we've heard a lot about playing at that star, playing at that outside cornerback position. There's a different quickness to him than I think I was expecting. Seeing him in person for the first time in fall camp, I mentioned this on a few other shows, but he looks like he's moving as if he always had a boost in Mario Kart, like just waiting for him to get going. And that acceleration and quickness is something that in that star position is so important. And I think he's got it right away to start his Texas career.
And he was a player as a late evaluation. We offered late, and it looked like he was going to go to Clemson, but then it was between Texas and Michigan, and we got him. He's from, I believe, Tampa, Florida, somewhere in that area. So that was another guy that was an underrated guy coming into this class that's already made an impact and running with the ones. And let's see, he's going to be playing a lot. So that's a freshman to definitely watch out for. So this offense now, this 2025 offense, they're very talented. There's a lot of great pieces especially on the offensive line and the wide receivers. But there's some new faces that Texas fans may have to get familiar with. Yes, we know DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo and DJ Campbell are coming back. But what are your expectations for the Texas offense breaking in some of these newer guys like a Parker Livingstone, an Emmett Mosley, a Jack Endries?
Yeah, I mean, look, you named them all right there. The pass-catching weapons for Arch Manning, they're there. Now, the big question is, what will that offensive line look like to be able to provide time to get him the ball where it needs to go? For me, that's the big question, because you have familiar faces on that offensive line, but they've not played cohesively together in a scene like this, right? Going against Ohio State, they're going to be tested immediately. So can that offensive line gel quickly enough to provide the time necessary for Arch Manning? That's the big question. And of course, in every loss Texas had a year ago, Texas didn't really run the ball all too well. Will they be able to do that behind this unit? Right? It's the first time in which you don't have a Jake Majors starting for Kyle Flood, a Hayden Connor in that conversation. And of course, we all believe that Trevor Gooseby is going to be really talented, but you don't have a first-round top 10 pick player left tackle with Calvin Banks. So a couple new faces. All in all, if Texas is able to run the ball and do so efficiently, I'm not talking about the Arch Manning runs because that's going to be a part of the offense as well, but through the running backs, that's going to be the ultimate way that they reach their ceiling with their offensive potential.
Definitely, and we always recruit really good pass catchers. They said Emmett Mosley has come in and he's absolutely firing. Like he's been really good so far, and he's coming from a similar offense to from Stanford as well. So that's going to be really fun to see his potential. Parkin Livingstone, I believe he went to your high school, CJ, right? Lovejoy High School. He's going to be a fan favorite because he's going to make a lot of plays down the stretch, and as well as Jack Endry. So very excited to see this receiving core. And then you add in a DeAndre Moore and a Ryan Wingo. This offense, once it gets clicking, it can be very scary to watch. So speaking of Ryan Wingo, so on this pod, we have really stressed that we believe Ryan Wingo is in the upper echelon of wide receivers in the country, in the same breadth as a Cam Coleman, a Ryan Williams, and Jeremiah Smith. He just didn't get the touches as those other guys did, and he was not the featured wide receiver. But we feel like this year with Texas playing in so many big games, he is going to become a household name. Do you think Ryan Wingo can be a top wide receiver in college football in the same conversation as those guys?
Yeah, I think so. And look, I know that the term breakout candidate gets thrown out a lot. And, for whatever reason, my mind doesn't include Ryan Wingo in that conversation because we saw, bits and spurts a year ago that, obviously the talent was there. But when you go back and you look at his statistical numbers versus that of those guys that you just mentioned, you say, okay, on a national scale, it's going to be time for Ryan Wingo to make his presence felt in that same conversation. So absolutely. I think that as Arch Manning's number one or 1.5, if you include DeAndre Moore in that conversation, right, that number one target for Wingo should absolutely open up. You saw what he was able to do already, a 75-yard touchdown against UTSA with Manning at the helm, big play on the end around against Michigan in which Texas just found ways to get him the rock and let his speed work for him. And look, again, it's very rare to find a guy that's 6'3", 205 pounds that runs as well as he does. And, he's not a Calvin Johnson, but that's what makes guys like that so special is that combination of size, speed, and hands. And look, he just got LASIK eye surgery over the offseason as well. He's going to be seeing the passes better than ever before. If you are buying stock, Ryan Wingo is the guy that you should be looking at to circle and get, in early, if you will, before the season begins.
I love that, and it seems like he's building a lot of rapport with Arch Manning. He took Arch Manning with his camp back in St. Louis, and this seems like they're getting very comfortable together. And Ryan Wingo loves being a Longhorn, despite being an out-of-state guy, and I think he's going to have a breakout year, and he's going to be a monster this year. So, 2 more questions for you, CJ. For the schedule, besides the obvious games like Oklahoma, A&M, Georgia, Ohio State, what is a trap game that you see that Texas has to watch out for this season?
It's interesting because look, the home schedule for Texas this year, not something that you're going to write home to, right? Outside of Arkansas at the back end, who I'm not expecting to be super competitive. And then of course, A&M. You don't have that marquee game, but that other game that I'm really looking at, kind of excited to see is, what will Vanderbilt look like coming to Austin, right? That's a hungry team. We heard about it at SEC Media Days. The quarterback believes that they can play for a college football playoffs position. The head coach believes that they should be playing deep into January. And if you have the belief of a quarterback and a head coach on the same page, and that kind of trickles down into the rest of the team, well, you start to overachieve based off of that belief. Vanderbilt played Texas close last year, right? I say close loosely. That should have been a 17-point victory for the Longhorns, but that's a team that knocked off Alabama. That's a team that beat Auburn. They went to double overtime against Missouri. It's a tough team. Now, talent-wise, Texas should be and again, should be far and away the better team in that game. But crazy things happen in SEC football, and especially when you believe in your quarterback and your head coach. I'm going to be interested to see what kind of threat they become whenever they travel to Austin later this year.
There's definitely a little bit more of a target now on Vanderbilt's back. Teams will be
Yes.
ready to play them. Last year, I think everybody underestimated them, thinking that they were the same Vanderbilt, and they snuck up on some people. Well, now people are like, they know they play with physicality, they play with a lot of heart. They kind of can watch film now on Diego Pavia's game, and let's see how much he's improved as a passer, because he didn't really throw the ball downfield that much. He was more with his legs than with his passing game. That's going to be an exciting game. I believe that's November 1st in Austin at DKR. So last question for you, CJ. So last year, so this is a question just not about Texas, but around the country. You correctly predicted that Indiana is a team to watch for last season, a team to watch that could make a run. Not only did they do that, they made the college football playoff, which nobody had on their bingo card. Nobody expected. So now I got to ask you, who is going to be that team this year that has the potential to make a run like Indiana?
Yeah, I'm staying in the Big Ten. That Indiana run was a lot of fun last year, by the way. But I'm staying in the Big Ten. I like Washington, and I know that they're 2 years removed from playing Texas in that in the Sugar Bowl in the college football playoff. They hit a wall last year, first year in the Big Ten, but I think they have the quarterback this year, Damon Williams Jr. I'm a big fan of his. I think adding Tacario Davis, the 6'4" cornerback from Arizona, who Texas had its eye on in the portal a little bit as well. Look, I think they're going to have some really, really nice pieces. I think the schedule fits favorably for them as well to make a run. I don't know if a lot of folks outside of the Big Ten are expecting a lot from Washington this year, but I do know they're about 55-1 to win the Big Ten. And for me, that's a lot of value. I do think that they're going to be a team that makes a lot of noise this fall.
Definitely, CJ has some great tips of not only just the Longhorns, but other teams that need to watch out for college football. And he watches a lot of teams around the country. So, CJ, thank you again so much for joining us. It was a treat to have you on. Before you leave, tell us where to find you on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. At ontexasfootball.com or on Twitter at CJVogel_OTF.
He's definitely a great follow on Twitter. Thank you so much for the insight in the Nuggets, CJ, and the analysis for this Texas team. And we hope to see you and Bobby again in Atlanta in December when hopefully Texas is in the SEC championship. Have a good one, CJ. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, and we'll see you in Atlanta.
Yep, hook 'em. So again, thank you so much to CJ Vogel for joining this episode. We hope everybody enjoyed the nuggets that he was able to bring us. He covers a team very closely. And again, be sure to give him a follow at CJ Vogel on Twitter. So now let's move on with this episode. So the college football coaches poll was brought up about a couple of days ago, and Texas was the number one team in the country, with Ohio State at 2, Penn State at 3, Georgia at 4, and Notre Dame at 5. And I'm really excited to see Texas at number 1 because they're getting the respect around the country that they deserve. They're one of the most talented teams from top to bottom in the country. They have a lot of depth. They have the quarterback. They have the playmakers on offense. And it is going to be a tough schedule this year, but Texas deserves to be ranked number 1. Even though Ohio State did win the national championship this year, they did lose a lot of key pieces to the NFL, and they're going to replace those pieces with a lot of talented players, but there's more question marks with Ohio State than there are with Texas. Penn State, I'm okay with being number 3. Drew Aller, their quarterback, comes back. He had improvement of a season last year for his junior year. Let's see how much he takes his last step with his last season on campus. They're going to have a hellacious defense led by Dennis Sutton, and their front 7 have a bunch of monsters on it, but how much can they output offensively and improve offensively? And let's see with the running back position, because they did bring both running backs back, Nicholas Singleton and Keytron Allen, but I'm more looking forward to the passing game because Penn State, we know they can run the ball, but it's always a question of how can they move the ball through the air and whether they're going to air it out deep because Drew Aller definitely has the arm, but let's see, it's a question mark with this Penn State offense. So for Georgia at number 4, they are again replacing a lot with Gunnar Stockton is the quarterback. He played well against Texas in the SEC championship game, struggled against Notre Dame, but it wasn't all his fault. The offensive line didn't do him any favors. But they are, they brought in a lot of pieces from the portal with Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas. They have Humphreys coming back as well and Lovitz, but and then as well as Frazier, their running back, just a matter of how consistently this offense is able to move the ball if you're Georgia, because their defense is going to be really good. They may be young on the defensive tackles, but they're really talented with the linebackers position, and they're talented in the back end, even though they're young, led by Malachi Starks. But Georgia has a very important games this year that are going to be at home compared to the road. Alabama is going to be at home. Texas is going to be at home. So those are games that they should be able to win. And I'm not going to bet against Georgia in the SEC until someone beats them. They are the top dog. And we think Texas is on the same level as Georgia, but Texas has to get it done and win either at Athens or in the SEC championship game in Atlanta. Notre Dame, so they have a new quarterback with Riley Leonard having went to the NFL. Jeremiah Love does come back, and they do have the really talented tight end, but I just question about Notre Dame's defense. They lost some players, and they do have a favorable schedule, but can they replicate that same run that they did last year? Because last year I felt like no one was really expecting Notre Dame to compete, and they kind of stuck up on people. Well, this year, I don't think Notre Dame's going to be sticking up on people because they were the national championship runner up and they have a big game right out of the gate. They play at Miami. That's a game that Notre Dame is better than Miami. They should beat Miami. And then they have A&M coming to their place. So they have a very interesting non-conference schedule. They're going to play a much improved USC team. But after they get by with those two non-conference games, they're the the rest of the schedule for them is very favorable. So let's see Notre Dame can make a run possibly to the quarterfinals, semifinals again. Clemson brings back a very talented team, but a young team with Cade Klubnik. We saw their very talented wide receivers in TJ Moore and Brian Wesco, and they have a really good running back. But Cade Klubnik is a beast. I think he could take the next step after he really improved last year as a junior after starting his college career very slowly. He's going to be in the Heisman conversation, but let's see with Clemson because they start right out of the gate against LSU. Can they start out with the bang? Because they've struggled with the first game playing a tough opponent, of course, with Georgia. But this year now they have another, SEC really tough opponent to start the season in LSU. But Clemson's schedule sets up to be very favorable because the ACC is not strong this year. I think Louisville will be decent and then SMU, but those teams don't have the talent that the Clemson Tigers have. So I think Clemson is going to make the playoffs and they are a national championship contender. Oregon also lost their quarterback in Dylan Gabriel, but they have a lot of talented wide receivers and running backs. They have a lot of speed. That's what they predicate their success as a program. But this Oregon defense is going to have to play better than they did last year. They're more of an offensive team. Let's see if they can play complementary football on both sides of the football. And Alabama, a lot of people are more high on Alabama than I am. I just think that they lost Jihad Campbell and a couple of other main players on the defensive end side of the football, even though that's not the main concern for me. The concern is Hylas Ty Simpson, who has been waiting his turn, able to take the offense to the next level under Kalen DeBoer, even though he's the more prototypical quarterback that Kalen DeBoer likes to recruit compared to Jalen Milroe. They do have very talented pieces on the offensive side of the football with Ryan Williams. Their running back Jan Miller is an absolute beast. They have Jeremy Bernard. They have a good tight end. So if the Alabama offense can take the next level and play better than they did last year and not struggle like they did at crucial times last year, I think Alabama can make some noise in the SEC. And a lot of people are projecting them to finish in the top three. But I am more high on the LSU Tigers. I just think this year, coming back, Nussmeier coming back, I like what they did in the portal. They got Anderson from LSU. They brought back some other very talented wide receivers. Caden Durham, one of the best running backs in the country, is coming back. But can LSU continue to improve on defense? They were atrocious in games last year on the defensive side of the football. And also they gave away some leads last year. They had the lead against Florida. They had the lead against A&M. And they lost some crucial games that they should not have last year. So can they focus and put it all together throughout the entire game for 4 quarters? That's going to be the key for LSU success. And this is going to be a big year with Brian Kelly on the hot seat. So LSU is my sleeper team in the SEC, but they have to put it all together, and let's see how much they rally behind Brian Kelly. So it's a really good, lot of talented teams in the country, but for the race for the national championship, ladies and gentlemen, is wide open. So the next topic I want to talk about is Pro Football Focus ranked their top 50 players in college football, and Texas is very well represented on this list. The usual players that you suspect would be on this list are with Colin Simmons at number 8, Anthony Hill at 14, Michael Tapp at 26, Malik Muhammad at 46, and Arch Manning at 50. This was just a 1 through 50 ranking. Let me just give you the top 10 players that they ranked. They ranked number 1 Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State, number 2 Caleb Downs from Ohio State, 3 Peter Woods from Clemson, 4 Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame, 5 Spencer Fano from Utah, 6 Leonard Moore from Notre Dame, 7 Cade Klubnik from Clemson. Of course, we know Colin Simmons at number 8, Dylan Stewart 9 from South Carolina, and number 10 TJ Parker from Clemson. First of all, I don't have a problem with where the Longhorns are ranked, but I think that Anthony Hill should be closer to the top 10, maybe like a 9 or 10. I just think that the production that he's put out there, he's the best linebacker in the country. Yes, he's better than Georgia's CJ Allen, who's another very talented linebacker. I just think that he's had more production in his college career so far than like a Dylan Stewart, who had a monster freshman season like, Colin Simmons did. And then TJ Parker from Clemson. He showed flashes, but he hasn't put it together, even though he did have 12 sacks. Let's see if he could show a little bit more consistency in his college career, unlike Anthony Hill. So that's my biggest problem with the list. But I think Colin Simmons could really rise to the top 5 if he has a really good sophomore year, even better sophomore year than he did a freshman year, when he had 9.5 sacks. This year, look for him to have 15 to 16 sacks, because the defensive ends coach Lee Allen Clark said that watching the film, Colin Simmons left a lot of meat on the bone, and he used a lot of his raw athleticism to get to the quarterback, because he's a really fast burst, and he is really good beat quickness, so he's able to get past the tackle on the edge position. Well, this year they're really working on him to improve his pass rushing moves, hand placement, to do a move and do a counter move on the tackle. So you're going to see a more complete player this year with Colin Simmons, and I think he can really get higher on this list when this is ranked at this time next year. Michael Taft, I think he's a top 3 safety in the country, probably one of the best safeties, not only in the SEC, but in college football as well. I'm okay with him. I would have put him between 20 and 26, so that's cool with me. Malik Muhammad, I'm a little surprised to see him on this list. He had a really good freshman year. Sophomore year, at times he got picked on, especially in Clemson and at times in the Georgia game. Let's see if he has a skill set. He has the ball skills. He has the length and the athleticism. Let's see how much he puts it together and how much he improves as a junior. Then Arch Manning is only at 50 just because he hasn't played very much, and he hasn't really showed the college football world what he can do against high-level competition. So obviously at this time next year, if Arch Manning has the season we think he's going to have, he's going to be higher on this list. But great to see 5 Longhorns in the top 50 in Pro Football Focus's list. So before we move on to the next topic, be sure to follow us on our social media channels at touchdown_Texas, and be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching, be sure to go back and watch our interview with CJ Vogel. He's a recruiting analyst for the University of Texas and College Football Insider. He works for On Texas Football. He was giving us some nuggets and notes as the Longhorns are in fall practice and they're about 24 days away from the start of the season. So be sure to go back and watch that episode, and be sure to subscribe and like this channel with Touchdown Texas. So they ranked the top 10 non-conference games of the year. So not surprisingly, Texas Ohio State is number 1, LSU Clemson is number 2, Florida Miami is number 3, Notre Dame Miami is number 4, and Michigan Oklahoma is number 5, with South Carolina and Clemson rounding out the top 6. So no brainer, Texas Ohio State is number 1, because it's the first time in the history of college football that a number 1 and number 2 team ranked in the country have played each other for the first game of the season, with Ohio State as the defending national champs. So that's good. Number 2, I liked because Clemson LSU is a very intriguing game. Two teams that had good years last year, with Clemson making the playoffs. LSU should have made the playoffs, but they missed the playoffs. Both teams are national championship contenders in the eyes of many experts around the country. Which team can get out to the fast start? Because LSU has struggled also with opening season games, losing to USC last year in Vegas, a game they should not have lost to, and then Clemson losing last year to Georgia to start the season. Which team is going to start on a high note? And this game is in Clemson, South Carolina. There's a debate about which venue is a real Death Valley. It's going to be a battle of really good quarterbacks that are going to be high on NFL draft boards. Kate Klubnik from Clemson, Garrett Nussmeier of LSU. Let's just see. It's going to be a very intriguing game, a very competitive game, and let's see which side of the ball has, if the defensive side of the ball has really improved for LSU to stop Kate Klubnik, and then let's see for Clemson how they're able to replicate last year's success, making it to the playoffs. So that's a game I'm very excited about. Florida Miami is a really good one too, because Miami made their presence known to the college football world last year when they went to Gainesville and they beat Florida, putting Billy Napier on the hot seat. Well, this year now Miami got Carson Beck from Georgia, and now Florida has DJ Lagway, who got a little banged up early in fall camp, but they said it was minor and he's doing better now. This is another very important game because Cristobal, he should have made the playoffs last year, but they lost at Syracuse the last game of the season. They did not make the ACC championship game, so they had a disappointing end to the season. Let's see how they rebound, and let's see how their defense plays, because Miami was an all offensive team last year and no defense at all. They would just have to outscore opponents. So let's see if Miami can be a more balanced team. And then Florida, they have really good talent on the offensive side of the football with Ball, their running back, Eugene Wilson. They have a plethora of wide receivers that are really talented. But let's see, they have some question marks on the defensive side of the football. This game is going to be in Miami, and it's not only bragging rights in Florida for recruiting, but which team we think can be able to take that next step and gain some momentum to start the season. Another game I'm excited about is Notre Dame Miami. Miami has two opportunities early in the season to get some big marquee wins. Notre Dame is ranked number 4th, coming off the runner-up for the college football playoffs last year, but they didn't return some of their defensive players. They went to the NFL, but we know how talented they are on the offensive side of the football with Jeremiah Love. Their tight end from Austin, Texas is really, really good player, but Notre Dame is not going to be able to sneak up on people. But Marcus Freeman is such a good coach, and Notre Dame needs this win because they're not going to get very many opportunities besides USC to be able to get some marquee wins on the schedule to put a resume out for the playoffs. So that's going to be another very intriguing game early in the season. The last game I want to hit on is Michigan against Oklahoma. Oklahoma struggled last year. Venables is not a very popular man in the city of Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma, but he's bringing a really talented defensive line back. They're one of the best in the country. Their defense has been not a problem, but let's see what John Mateer, who they brought in from Washington State, as well as bringing their offensive coordinator from Washington State, Arbuckle. Let's see how much this Oklahoma offense improves, because John Mateer is going to have weapons on the outside with Deion Burks, and they just got banged up last year, Oklahoma. Let's see if they're able to stay healthier this season and finish games and be more competitive in games, because we saw what they did to Alabama in Norman, Oklahoma. And this is going to be a chance for Oklahoma to get on the right footing, because this game is going to be at home. This is a game that they should be able to win, because Michigan, I don't have huge expectations for Michigan. I still think they're going to be bowl eligible, but they bring in a true freshman quarterback. He was ranked the number one recruit in the country, Bryce Underwood. But around him, I'm not sure how good of a team that they have around him, even though Michigan's defense is going to be really good as well. So I expect Oklahoma to win this game, but this is a very intriguing game, because Michigan is ranked very highly, even though I don't think they should be. But this is the chance for Oklahoma to really try to gain some momentum before they get into the SEC schedule. So the last topic of the day I want to talk about is defensive coordinators in college football. So there's some really good ones out there. Of course, Phil Parker from Iowa is number one. Jim Knowles, who came from Ohio State and is now at Penn State, he's number two. Glenn Schumann, who's been with Georgia, is number three. Tom Allen, who Clemson recently hired, is number four. And then Pete Kokowski, the defensive coordinator for Texas, is at number five. I think Pete Kokowski should be in the top three. Just the way that he's restructured this defense and the personnel from when they first started, when he first came with Sark from Washington in 2021 to where the defense is now. His schemes are just excellent. They're hard to game plan against. He throws a lot of exotic coverages, mixed coverages. Like I was talking about earlier with CJ, he knows how to use his players in a variety of ways, moving them all around the field, making them very versatile, confusing the offense. And the talent that he has recruited to the University of Texas and the development that Pete Kokowski has, has really allowed Texas to become one of the upper echelon teams in college football. And it just shows with the amount of draft picks and with the play on the field, because they went from one of the worst pass defenses in 2022 to one of the best in 2023. It did help having Michael Tapp, Jade Barron, and Andrew Makuba there, but he fostered that defense, and he's a big reason why the Texas defense is going to be scary this year and really tough to guard against. So I think T. Kokowski should be number three. Phil Parker, Iowa constantly puts out a really good defense. Like they don't allow teams to average usually more than 20 points a game, even though their offense is pretty pathetic. Not gonna lie. So I'm okay, with him being one, just because of his resume. He's done it for a while. He's been, with Iowa since 1999, and Iowa is historically known for putting a good defense out there. But Jim Knowles also I would put as number two, because he was with Ohio State's defense the last 3 seasons, winning a national championship. So you have to give credit for that. And they're known as a really hard defense to play against, Jim Knowles' defense, because he's also very exotic with the schemes. They were third nationally in total defense. I'm talking about Ohio State last year, first in pass defense. So I just think that he's going to bring that to Penn State and make them even more dangerous. But I would rank also Pete Kokowski at number three. Then Glenn Schumann, like I said, he's done it for a while with Georgia. I would rank number four, and Tom Allen number five. But Pete Kokowski, if Texas wins the national championship, he definitely has a chance to be number one or number two on this list. Well, thank you so much for watching this episode of Touchdown Texas. We hope you enjoyed this content, and go back and watch our interview with CJ Vogel. He gives us a lot of insights as Texas is getting ready to get closer to opening the regular season against the Ohio State Buckeyes. And be sure to stay tuned on this Touchdown Texas channel. Be sure to follow us on our social media channels at Touchdown_Texas on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We have some very exciting content coming up. We're going to be doing a position by position analysis on the defense of the next episode, and then the following episode will be on the offense. And also, me and Nick are going to be giving our schedule, our record predictions. We're going to be going through their schedule and telling you which record we think Texas is going to finish with in the regular season. And so plenty more to come, plenty more exciting content. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and we'll see you next time.